looks like it is 8:30. We've got Councilmember Gardner, Councilmember Jurinsky is on. So we'll go ahead and get started with our meeting. So good morning and welcome everyone to the PED meeting for 2025. Happy New Year. And obviously we did not have a January meeting. We did not really have any items on to make a full agenda for that meeting. However, as you all know, we had a December meeting. So let's just still have one off. Anyway, so I will call the meeting to order on February 12th. And the first thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. And Councilmember Gardner was on the committee last year. I know he's driving. Are you able to say if you approve the minutes? Not hear him. Okay. Let's see if I'm going to do quick minutes. Text. Well, probably he's driving. I probably shouldn't be texting him. Okay, we'll skip the minutes for right now. And we'll go ahead and go on the first item, which is the PED recap. And if you saw in your backup, I know, Janine, you've got a PowerPoint, but there was a whole list of items that we did last year. So it was a very productive and busy year. So I'll turn it over to Janine.
Thank you. And hopefully you're seeing my presentation.
I am.
Great. I don't want Crystal to fall out of her chair that I'm actually doing my own. So Janine Rustad, your Director of Planning and Business Development. And as our chair said, this is a recap of our very busy 2024. Okay, I think sorry about that. Starting with items that moved forward to council, we had two 13th Avenue grant applications. This is for the area around the parking lot currently at the 13th Avenue RTD light rail station. We've got two grants in the amount of $4 million that will allow us to design and construct the bridge that is required to open that area for housing, hopefully also including affordable housing at the RTD site. Last year, the big theme of the year was the UDO process updates. That's moving forward for approval in early 2025. I'll give you the timeline later in the presentation for that. That was our big project for the year, but as you know, housing is at the forefront of everybody's mind, including our council and our staff. So we began the first phase of the UDO housing analysis. We also have several amendments already coming forward with that, but a presentation later today will go in depth of phase 2. We had a resolution on the Lowry former base that is within Aurora. That right now is on hold so that we can coordinate with the community colleges of Colorado. But as you know, this is a very large vacant area that could use some revitalization within the city. And then we've had some minor text updates to the city code on oil and gas. So I'll pause slightly, let you absorb that. As usual, we had a lot of information. Quarterly retail development updates, which includes the retail strategy, which is underway. You had a presentation of that at your winter workshop. Staff is working diligently to wrap it up and bring that forward for approval this year. Quarterly development review updates, and you'll have one of those with Jacob in the lead, myself singing backup in today's meeting. You had a summary of land use legislation, which was something new for PED, but as we know, there has been a lot going on in the state legislature that is looking at land use, particularly at times abrogating home rule. Aurora Places, we updated you on the implementation of our comprehensive plan. We updated you. We finally made progress with the HOA and community group registration now requiring 2 points of contacts, hopefully avoiding when someone goes off a board or moves those notices going into a void. We had an annual Energy and Environment Division update at the end of the year. Jacob and his team updated you on Gun Club Road and what that might look like, getting improvements done moving forward. And then also from Jacob, as I said, my partner in crime here, a pad-ready commercial concept update. So we're also trying to get more outside presentations. And last year we had the Aurora Chamber of Commerce and then Visit Aurora annual update. I believe we had some updates also by AEDC. Sorry, that's been left off.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah. And we will invite them back. And we're also hoping to get the Havana bid to give us an update this year. General updates and presentations, the Public Utilities Commission rulemaking. We had an update on that. Always, we do a Fitzsimmons Innovation Community History and update. We'll have more on that as they are updating their master plan this year. And then an update on who is Aurora. So, of course, looking forward to what we're going to do in 2025. The big thing, again, is the housing amendments. We are looking at small lots. With small lots, there's a lot that we need to take into consideration. There's parking. That when I go into the scope at a later presentation, I'll go in more detail. But we're also still working on compliance with some of that state legislation. That includes ADUs, parking around transit-oriented centers, and then figuring out what we need, if anything, on the lifting of restrictions of the number of unrelated people in a household. And then we are continuing the development review improvements. And as I mentioned, that work coming out of last year is moving forward. Our tentative schedule on UDO amendments for process improvements is February 26th for Planning and Zoning Commission, a council study session on March 10th, with a public hearing and first reading on March 24th, and then second reading on April 17th, which gives an effective day in May. I also want to mention with this that both the planning team and team members from Jacob's department, as well as Aurora Water, are looking on how we'll implement these changes, making sure we have a core group that are going to become our experts in each department and help guide and mentor other team members. And a reminder that these changes were made in partnership with the development community. So another big area for 2025 is going to be retail. We are looking forward to the adoption of the retail strategy, which will include prioritization of policies in our target areas. We'll continue our quarterly update on retail. And of course, in May, we have the ICSC attendance. Your chair, Councilmember Bergan, will be joining us, as well as Councilmember Lawson. And then, as always, we provide you an update on that conference. I will note that this year it is a little smaller because the Las Vegas Convention Center is under construction, so we're in a different, more compressed space, but we will still have our presence there. And then project updates, as I mentioned, the Fitzsimmons Innovation Community Master Plan update. We always like to come in with Aerotropolis and how that's going, an update on our comprehensive plan. We're doing great with implementation of that plan. And then we'll continue to update on other area-wide planning efforts. I'm sure we'll see something on the 13th Avenue station. And with that, I am happy to take your questions and suggestions.
Great. Thank you, Janine. Questions from either Councilmember Jurinsky or Gardner?
Nothing from me.
Thank you. No, I think that, there was a lot covered last year. When you say on the project updates that we're going to have presentations on the other area so I don't know if we did it last year, but maybe the year before, we were able to have a view of the entire city, kind of like what ICSC that we prepare for before we go, just as to what's going on in the entire city. So would that be something that we would see?
Absolutely. A lot of times we concept focus on the Northeast area, so we can do both Northeast where most of our development's happening, but we also have a lot going on with the Colfax corridor and other developments, so we're happy to do that.
Yeah, in my area, we have Prairie Point, and we have also Overlook. I don't remember the name of it. It's Overlook, it's something. So yeah, just any commercial or residential throughout the city.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Councilmember Janine, I think we could pull together something that's ward specific if that would be helpful for the council members.
That'd be great. It's just nice to know what's going on, you know, throughout the entire city. And, you know, I tend to focus obviously on my ward, and Northeast, but
Right.
yeah, great. So thank you.
Okay.
All right. And next is the development review, a recap. And I think this is you, Jacob.
Indeed. All right. And Janine and I will kind of tag this one a little bit. Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate it. Good morning, council members. Jacob Cox, Director of Development Services. So we're going to kind of walk through, and I know for particularly you and Councilmember Gardner, you've heard some of this, but to walk through some of the highlights from last year, talk a little bit about the metrics, some of the numbers, and I had a couple questions that you had raised at the winter workshop that I wanted to touch on a little bit, Councilmember Bergan. So next slide, please. So as Janine mentioned, lots of code and manual updates. So we've been working with our stakeholder engagement community there with the development community, making sure that we're touching base with the HBA, consultant communities, the folks that actually work on these projects, the business community. So we want to make sure kind of at a high level that anything that we're working on is not baked in the silo by city staff. We want to make sure it works for the development community. So that's what we've been doing a lot of work on in the last couple of years. So the UDO, the roadway updates, drainage manuals, traffic, pros is looking at the dedication criteria now with those manual updates. And so a lot of good work's been done between the staff and the development stakeholder community. Janine mentioned the UDO updates. One of those, an example of that is that neighborhood plan that we came up with. And that was something that Janine and I, our management team, we meet every other week over in the office and kind of hash out issues that we're hearing from the development community. One of the big ones in the last 2 years has been infrastructure site plans and trying to find a consolidated approach to have a better process for a lot of that in these big master plan communities. So you mentioned Prairie Point, projects like that, the Aurora Highlands, Windler, Painted Prairie. We wanted to make sure that we had a good approach to help those developers deliver 50, 100, 200 lots and do the infrastructure review and development of that really efficiently to get them to civil plans and get those builders to permit as efficiently as possible. So we came up with what we think is a good plan, something that's been residing in our code for a while now since the last UDO full update was implemented, and we just haven't really found a good way to utilize it. And we feel like the neighborhood plan has worked out really well. We did some pilots in the last year, and so happy to answer any questions about that. But Janine mentioned the UDO housing analysis and the roundtables. Did you want to add any more on that piece, Janine?
Yes, absolutely. You know, with the roundtables, we are not experts in building housing. We don't know what's coming down the pike. We don't know what we've tried to follow trends. So these roundtables were instrumental in hearing from the development community on what they need from our code. And the other thing I want to mention that we did out of these roundtables is it's one thing to draft code and then try it and see if it works. So this is another area where we've done pilot projects, and I just want to mention, kind of brag about us, that organizations like Urban Land Institute, ULI, the Colorado chapter of American Planning Association, they're pointing to Aurora as being a leader by doing pilot projects and not waiting till the code is fully baked. Jacob, I'll also jump in on the plugged wells around the easements around plugged wells. We've had a roundtable discussion on that, and it was another really good exercise in listening to the development community. They brought their expert in oil and gas, and we are very, very close. Where we started a long ways away on a solution, we're very close, if not there by now, and we'll be bringing that forward as well.
Great. Thanks, Janine.
I guess the next one is me too, the administrative decision documentation. When I started, there were 3 documents for administrative decision and different pieces going out, whether it was to council, a notice to the public. So one of my favorite words is innovation. And one of our team members looked at this and approached Brandon and said, "This is too complicated. Can I come up with a more streamlined way?" And Brandon said, "Go for it." Now we have 2 parallel documents that basically say the same thing, one going to council, the other to the applicant and the public as notices of a decision.
Great. Thanks, Janine. The next bullet there, license agreement and dedicatory map document. So this is something, these 2 items actually came out of the red tape committee hearings that we all took to heart and tried to figure out, how do we approach this and streamline some of our processes based on the feedback we heard. So the license agreement component, we worked with our colleagues in public works, risk management to work through an approach to consolidate the need to ask for so many separate license agreements. And this is something that came from particularly some of the developers in the Northeast that were looking at those license documents and saying, is there a better way to do this? And so we figured out a terms and conditions approach. As you all are aware, we've got 3 different counties, so we have to record these documents in 3 counties. So we found a streamlined approach to add that language at a high level in a singular document and then not require so many separate agreements. And the dedicatory map document, this is something that came up from one of our largest industrial development projects. The engineers working on that project were doing hundreds of separate easement dedications because they weren't quite subdividing, but they needed to dedicate to get water lines in the ground. And so it was actually creating kind of a nightmare for the submittal process for that project. So we came up with a streamlined approach, working with some of the private sector engineering firms that were doing a lot of this work, and came up with an approach that helps our staffing and workload and helps them get through the process more efficiently. This has been a really good approach that streamlined and helped us have a more sustainable volume of work and get people to the approval stages more quickly. Major progress has been made on the Amanda project. It hasn't quite touched the development folders yet. We're just starting on the development application folder. Civil plans are being worked on concurrently. I think once the developers kind of have those 2 folders turned over and out to the business community, I think it's going to really streamline a lot of the things that Janine and I and the teams have been working on in terms of formalizing our business process with a lot of these updates and in coinciding with those code updates. And so a lot of progress has been made. That team's been largely working on the other organizational areas within Amanda because that is a business process for the city and not just development. It's an ongoing focus for us, the improved culture of customer service and performance. Like I said, we want to make sure that the things that we're working on work for the development community. We are here to hear from and work through issues with the development community. Janine and I are in meetings all day long with developers and their consultants, as are our teams. And so we want to make sure that we're listening to that and that our staff has a customer service approach. One thing that Janine and I have been really driving home with our teams, and I see this particularly over the last year, is that there's a culture of collaboration and partnership. We are a key partner for these projects, and that's extremely important. I think that a lot of cities don't see themselves in that way through the entitlement process. We want to make sure that developers see us as a partner. We want to get these projects done as well. They need to meet our pertinent codes, regulations, and zoning parameters. But at the end of the day, we would like these projects to get approved. That's our job. It's to make sure they're meeting our code and getting to an approval stage. And, we're working with our partners over in ADC to make sure that when they bring us a big commercial project, we're competing with other cities to make sure that we can bring those jobs to the market, bring those projects to the market here in Aurora. So that's something that we work every day on as a group. Process requirements and refinements, pilot projects, as Janine mentioned. I think the pilots have been perceived really well through the development community. We're working through those neighborhood plan pilots. We're working with our partners in ARDA to help them deliver those large regional transportation projects and arterial infrastructure more efficiently. So this is something that from executive management, they've really supported us in allowing us to go out there and kind of work through and find the pinch points. We've got collaborative developers that understand that, hey, we're testing a project out. We're going to learn from it. If there's things that we need to modify before we go implement it formally in code, we can work through those issues. As Janine said, it's been very helpful and illuminating for us to kind of understand some of those pinch points and refine and make sure that we've got a really efficient process moving forward. Timeline updates, this is largely around civil plans. And so one of the complaints that I had heard over the last couple of years was that there was a lack of transparency and understanding around some of the civil plan timelines on the really big sets of drawings that we deal with. And I'll get into some of those on on the metrics in terms of the volume of work. But as we're developing a brand new city in the Northeast, a lot of these civil plan sets are 300 pages, and it's our timelines on the civils have largely historically been based on the sheet counts. And so we've consolidated. We've worked with the development community. We spent about a year kind of doing stakeholder outreach, polling the data, figuring out how much time do we need to actually review sets of drawings, finding with the Amanda updates, finding some efficiencies on how we do them culturally. And so one of the areas was signature set, which is similar to on the development application side, the Mylar stage. Signature set on civils is where it comes in the door and it's the final review before the city engineer, the leadership team in Aurora Water finally signs those construction documents. And we wanted to make sure that we're tightening that up, getting through all the major comments early in the process and getting those out the door in a really efficient way. So that's what's gone into the civil timeline updates. And I think that's going to really help the development community. And then the organizational structure updates, that's largely been around myself and my team with consolidation of some of the general management divisions into development services, Office of Development Assistance, Office of Process Improvement, and then some parts of public works. So the civil engineering team, the traffic review team, land services review, and the building department have moved under the one department now, and with Janine as my counterpart in planning, and then our leadership team over in Aurora Water on the drainage and utility side. We've got I think a very streamlined approach to development review at this point, and we've got a really good leadership team that's very much on the same page. Next page, Crystal. So just to talk a little bit, and I'll go into the deep dive here in a sec, but baseline on-time metrics annualized. So this is 2024, average 90% on time across all stages. So this is pre-app notes, development applications, drainage plans, civils, easements, license agreements, building plan reviews, inspections on the day requested, and calls answered to the permit center within 45 seconds. And I'll show you some of those numbers. Quite impressive, but the team across the board has done a great job. Those of you that recall some of the numbers that you were seeing coming out of the pandemic and red tape committee hearings a few years ago, these numbers are really strong, and our team's done an amazing job. And the volume of work has not gone down. It's gone up in recent years. And so we're facing a lot of growth, a lot of applications coming in the door. So kudos to the team on that. We're really, really pleased with some of these numbers.
And Jacob, before you move off this slide, one thing I want to mention is that we do not have the team focusing on numbers.
Right.
As Jacob mentioned earlier, that we see ourselves as partner in the development review process. So rather than pushing a letter out and have it be on time, we will take an extra day or two to work through an issue with the developer, whether it's they need to swap a page out, or there's something close that we need a little understanding, or we need to coordinate better internally. We're making sure that what goes out is right, and hopefully it's the last review letter, versus especially when we get to that third review, versus just getting it out on time and saying you need to resubmit.
Yep, absolutely. And that's kind of on the development application side. On the civil side, very similarly, we sometimes will kind of push pause on that, take a ding on the metrics to say, hey, we're at signature set, sign these plans. We've got 2 utility issues that we need to work through. We really need the correction. It's easier for staff to hit reject, send those out the door and have them come back in. Well, that might be 3 weeks of review time, administrative time to get it done. If we push pause and say, we don't really care about the metric number, we want to get this project done, go ahead and have your engineer send us the 2 sheets. We'll do the back end work, and then we send out an approval. So that's been extremely helpful. And I think the development community knows that we collaborate with their engineers and their land design teams every day to make sure we're getting projects to the finish line. That's extremely important. And picking up the phone, our staff, and having cultural conversations around customer service. When there's an issue, don't just send out the blanket letter. Pick up the phone, call the consultant, let us know so we can have a conversation with the developer and make sure that it's transparent. Everybody understands what's going on. We're all on the same page, and we all want to work together to get the project complete. And so I think that's gone a long way, and we've seen a really big improvement on the customer service aspects. Next slide, please. So just some of the deep dives on the numbers here. So pre-application meetings, and this is Office of Development Assistance to facilitate those numbers, and that is we do these every Thursday. We've been solidly booked. Historically, we kind of did 3 or 4 a week. We've been pretty steady at 4 to 5 a week for the last 2 years on these. So we were up 25% compared to 2023, 181 pre-apps last year. So 100%, 99% on time. I think we sent one late to work through a comment, but strong numbers. And this is all hands on deck. This is largely, oh, sorry, someone's not muted. This is largely planning has a huge effort on the pre-app meetings to make sure that we're providing that high level due diligence. But this is the developers, and it could be developers. It could be one business owner that's never going to do another project again, but they want to build a restaurant. This is a great due diligence session that the city offers. It kind of sets us apart, in my opinion, from other jurisdictions. It's a free service. This is so that that developer, that business owner has a roadmap of our process that's context-based for their project, and it's a very good service the city offers. So very happy with those numbers. And it also is our kind of indicator of if those were up 25% last year, we think that those, 60, 70% of those will likely turn into development applications this year on formal submittals. And so DAs, you see those remain pretty steady. And as Janine said, we're actively working to, get the overall numbers up, but those are very good numbers. And it's all hands on deck in that one as well. So it's the engineers that work in my group that are working with Janine's planners to make sure that they're getting the traffic comments taken care of. The neighborhood outreach happens at that stage. So a lot of coordination from every discipline goes into that development application to make sure that we're having a project that meets our standards, gets it approved so they can go out and get under construction. Drainage plans, and we've done a lot of work with the drainage team to actually reduce the number of preliminary drainage reports and really focus on if we've got that master drainage level information for these large projects in the Northeast, for example, we really should be focusing more on the final drainage and those civil plan documents and not having an extra part of our bureaucratic process for drainage reviews. That's something that we've been working a lot with our leadership team in Aurora Water, and they've done a great job. And listening to the development stakeholders again on that and trying to figure out some efficiencies around drainage reviews. Civil plan approvals. So we were up 41% on civil construction plans. I think this really illuminates, particularly as you drive that 470 corridor from the south area in Councilmember Bergan's ward up to the DIA and the airport area. We are seeing a lot of infrastructure go on the ground. All those districts that council approves that we've seen over the years, they're out there building infrastructure, putting roads, water lines in the ground, and that's getting us set for meeting the market from the home building community. And those numbers have remained pretty steady over the last couple of years, but making sure that those developers, those mass development projects are ready to kind of handle the market conditions for projects going vertical. Easements and license agreements, I talked a little bit about the dedicatory map process, finding some efficiencies, and also seeing some of those license agreement numbers actually trickle down. The volume of work is still there because there's a lot of complicated review, but we'd like to see less of those separate documents coming in the door and more consolidated approach, which will really help, I think, the development community. Next slide, please. Getting into some of the building division numbers here. So new commercial buildings, it shows down 32% from 2023 to 2024. Kind of a reminder, a lot of those big projects are 18-month life cycles in terms of their initial due diligence sessions with the city, working through those land use entitlement, civil plans. And then typically it's that next year we're issuing the building permit. We have a lot of big projects in the pipeline right now. We've been working with ADC on some really large users coming in the door. And so I think those will start to trickle up here over the next several months. Multifamily, I think we've all kind of seen the multifamily industry a little saturated in the Denver metropolitan area across all the cities, our neighboring cities. And so you're seeing that with some of these numbers down 56%, 63% on those projects and unit counts. And Councilmember Bergan, I think you asked Greg Hayes in our winter workshop a question about the revenues for development review going up, but capital impact fees going down. When I look at that multifamily unit count going down 56%, that's around $7.6 million of capital impact fee potential. So that's a bit of a discrepancy that you're seeing, in my opinion. And then those new commercial buildings down 32%, those big projects, data centers, the big industrial facilities, that's a lot of potential sales and use tax revenue for the city. And so I think, again, we're going to see a lot of permits issued this year. And a reminder, the way our building division approaches things, those developers don't and builders don't pay those permits up front. They pay them when they pull the permits. And so you're seeing those fees come in at the end of the line on the entitlements.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. And so where we remain really strong is the renovations on existing buildings. That was up 16%. We did almost 25,000 or over 24,000 reviews on existing buildings last year. And then we issued overall for the city, almost 26,000 building permits were issued last year. And so that's across the board. 16,000 plan reviews were completed by the building division. And then when you look at some of the metrics there, we were 99% on time with 16,000 reviews. We did almost 135,000 inspections in the field on projects, 96% on time with same day requested inspections. And then the one that always impresses me is the phone calls to the permit center there, Access Aurora in the permit center, 78,489 calls, 97% of those were answered within 45 seconds. That's just extremely positive customer service. And those were up 5% from the last year. So really good numbers there. You see some of the revenue numbers. We were up 5% on the revenues for Development Review Fund. A lot of that, as I mentioned, was really the building division on those existing projects, and we anticipate that will continue. Next slide, please. So focus on performance. We've talked a lot about it at a high level, but just some examples of what we're approaching it from the executive leadership team on down. We want a culture of performance and predictability. We want predictability for staff and for the development community, management and leadership oversight, culture of customer service, process improvement and technology, process documentation, teaching, and training. And so it's a feedback loop. We want to make sure that we're having these conversations with the development community, with our staff. Janine and I, and we'll go through a future slide here in just a second. We're meeting with our teams regularly. Jason and Laura are shepherding some meetings with all development review staff. Janine and I meet bi-weekly with our leadership teams and key stakeholders to make sure that we're working through the details. And then we're having deep dive sessions with individual teams to make sure that they're hearing what we're talking about at a leadership level so that the whole organization is hearing the same information. We're all on the same page. And so our goal at the end of the day is to get projects approved while meeting the code and regulations. Next slide, please. And just some examples here. So we've got, we send out survey links on some of our application forms. So pre-apps, I think these go out on some DAs, some of the building documentation. So we're always seeking feedback, and these have really gone up over the last several years, but positive trends in staff helpfulness. We're 70% on very helpful or somewhat helpful ratings. We've seen a big decline on the somewhat unhelpful, very unhelpful. And, we're aware that when people have maybe a bad example or have a particularly bad experience on something, they might be the ones to fill out these surveys. But we're getting a lot of people that are feeling more comfortable answering these surveys. We would like to hear this information. We want to know what's going on because that helps Janine and I manage our teams, course correct where we need to. If we're not hearing anything, we're expecting that things are fine. And so, we want to hear that feedback, good, bad, or otherwise. And so we do ask these questions. How the most recent experience compare with your prior experience? And so we do these regularly. We have an ongoing method of collecting this information. And so we feel that we're moving the needle to kind of the much better response rate, up from 11 to 19%, and a reduction from the worst to much worse. Those have gone down about 20% over the last year or so. So trending in the right direction, in our opinion, on some of that survey information. Next slide, please. So I mentioned the all staff. So this is a recent one we did to kick off the new year. So that's Jason up there talking to the team. Laura and Jason spearhead these meetings, and Janine and I kind of go over the deep dive information that our team needs to know. And so we just want to make sure that they understand the expectations kind of at an all staff. And this is a mandatory meeting that we do on a quarterly basis with city management. And then we're having subsequent meetings from there, depending on the topic. So if we're talking about the neighborhood plan, we get that pre-app team together, the folks that are working on those development applications and civil logistics coordination, and we make sure that we're having that meeting at a staff level so that they understand the expectations. They can ask the leadership team any questions, and we're all on the same page, and we do this regularly. The other thing I'll mention is we have regular meetings with the large developers, but we will meet with anybody in any way they would like to meet. And so we've got meetings. I think today's Wednesday. We've got a lot of meetings coming up at the office over there today, and we do a lot of coordination meetings. We want to make sure that we're meeting the demands of the development community, and also making sure that we've got the right staff level in those meetings. Sometimes it might not be appropriate for Janine and I to be in those meetings at the director level, but it might be, hey, we've got a couple specific questions for that planner or that traffic engineer. Let's bring them in, but also make sure that we're not wasting staff's time with Janine and I can go handle an issue. So we're trying to be really targeted and strategic about not having staff sit in too many meetings that they don't need to be in, and I think we've got a really good, efficient approach going into the new year on our meeting cadence. Next slide, please. So just a little brief overview of our 2025 initiatives. So as I mentioned, development services, planning and business development, and then parks and open space and rural water those are the 4 prongs of the development review process for the city. And then stakeholders in the middle. It's not just us. It's about how we respond to the developed community, meeting market demands. Pros manual updates. Janine talked about that a little bit. That's a big overhaul for this year. The neighborhood plan implementation, that was the pilot projects we worked through last year. Janine's team's working through the code updates on that. I think that's a really positive. I believe you heard from Chris Fellows at the last PED meeting that pilot on their project went really well. We're actually doing a couple other pilots right now on that. We do have one for a commercial site that we think is going well at the moment. And so Xcel Energy, we're actively working with Xcel Energy. We've heard a lot of issues about how we process certain things in terms of their documentation. We don't want our process for Xcel to impact developers. So we're trying to partner with Xcel to figure out a more efficient process for them. So that's something that's on the forefront for us going into the new year. Warranty period on drainage. We'd like that to be consistent with how we approach roads as well. You've heard from Janine a lot in the last couple months on affordable housing, Proposition 123. We feel that we largely kind of already respond to that, I think, in terms of our process, but go ahead, Janine.
Exactly what I was going to say. With all the improvements we're making, Proposition 123, since we opted in, we have to show by November this year that each stage of the process, so whether it's the land use, the civil, can be completed within 90 days. And thanks to the collaborative work, we are there.
Thank you, Janine. Manda updates, I mentioned those. Those are ongoing. That's a huge overhaul for the city from a tech standpoint. Meeting audits, who's in the meetings, cadence, agendas. We want to make sure that if it's a long-ranging master plan project, we typically have bi-weekly meetings for the most part on the big projects because there's so much going on at one time. There might be 24 filings in at any one time. We've got different staff. There's a lot of moving pieces on those. So those are regular meetings. We're always meeting about those to iron out issues and make sure that things are going the right direction. If it's one commercial project, what we tend to do is schedule meetings around their review letters going out and make sure the team can come together, sit around a table, work through those comments, and make sure that it's an efficient review coming back in the door. So we don't want anything being done in the dark here. We want to be as transparent and collaborative as possible. And so we do absolutely try to strategize those meetings based on the needs of the project. Our project process, project teams, training, collaborative project management. This is where the Office of Development Assistance is really key. Unique group in the city. They are our liaisons, the development community, the ombudsman under Chesarina Dancy's leadership on that team, and putting together project teams based on where the project is, the history on the project. Janine mentioned that PED-ready concept. What we're trying to do on those big commercial projects to get them done really efficiently is to make sure that we've got the same review staff going from site plan to civil plan to permit sign off in some inefficiencies. So we've really tried to tighten up our approach to project quality intake, ongoing area of focus. We can't get projects approved if we're not getting quality plans in the door. So this has been a lot of our conversations with the development community. I think that we've really tightened up and found a really good approach for particularly civil plans, modeled off how the building division is for years. So those, in my opinion, are working a lot better than they have been in the past. And we're doing the same thing on the site plans, neighborhood plans, subdivision plats. We want a quality plan set in the door, and then we want to get that project to the point of completion. Rounds of review, reducing late comments. This is a big area of contention I've heard from developers over the years is getting a late comment. None of us want to make a late stage comment that rejects a set of plans at the end stages. That is not something that any of the leadership team wants to do. We want to make sure that we're getting those big reviews done early stages so that we can sign documents at the end of the line. That's about predictability and transparency of our process. And so that's an ongoing area of focus for us. Code updates, as Janine talked through, civil timeline updates I mentioned, that's all about transparency and predictability and finding the right timelines that work for both us and the development community. And then milestone notifications for certificate of occupancy items. This is something that's come up that my inspections team has kind of put on my radar about having trouble getting pond certificates done. Street lights are a really long lead item, particularly on those orders. So we're just making sure that we're communicating some of those big items that are 6-9 months down the road. When they pull that permit, we say, hey, just be mindful, the pond cert needs to come in at a certain time. Get your street lights ordered. We don't want to have an issue with a CO if you're trying to get people moving in a multifamily project in 6 months. So it's all about us getting proactive and getting ahead of some of these big issues. I know that was a ton of information. I think that was my last slide. Yeah, thank you. Any questions?
Okay. Any questions from Councilmember Jurinsky or Gardner?
No questions for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple. First, I want to say thank you. You know, it's interesting to see this all. I mean, it was a huge presentation. It was really well done. You know, we've had the red tape and just chipping away at different improvements over the past couple of years, and to see it all like this. I mean, it is a ton of work that has had to occur and I remember, you know, during the COVID days where our customer service ratings were not very good. And so really happy to see that improvement. So thank you to everybody that works on all these development plans and reviews and so forth. Couple questions. And I just want to say the roundtables, I do think those have been extremely effective. You know, I think just being able to get feedback from actual developers and understand where there might be, you know, some improvements to be made from their perspective. I mean, like you said earlier, they know building and can really cast a light on where there are some problems. I have a question on Amanda. You said you know, we're kind of getting close. So when there's a code change, does it go across all the different departments that it needs to touch? Like, you know, if it needs to touch traffic or pros or.
Yeah. You want to jump in, Janine, and I can answer on the Amanda front?
Yeah, from the UDO standpoint, we absolutely include in our process not only the development community, but ODA, the engineers that are reviewing, the engineers that maintain, because we realize that it has wide-ranging impacts. And for example, when I talk about the housing phase 2 we're heading into, including Jacob and his team in reviewing proposals, making sure we're getting input from pros because they play a big part in that. So yes, and I'll mention too that I'm really excited with some of our shuffling going on, that Jacob and our teams are going to be neighbors.
Oh, very good.
Yeah.
So we have that ability.
I don't know, Jacob, is that good for you?
Yeah, it'll be good.
Okay.
We're consolidating because I've had staff on 3 different floors, and so we're putting them all in one space. So Janine and I will be on both wings of the second floor.
Oh, very good. Okay, and then just what else did I have? I was trying to write notes down. Oh, the 3-year warranty period on drainage. I know I've heard, you know, that's costly to developers.
Mm-hmm.
How did that change happen from the 1 year to the 3 year? Was that a state mandate or was that ours?
Laura, do you have some details on that one?
I don't. I don't know if we have anyone on from Aurora Water. It's something we need to have further conversation on, which is why it's on our list this year.
Okay.
It was an early conversation in 2024. So we're going to circle back on it with Aurora Water this year and have further analysis on that.
Okay, and then my last question, it's on the Prop 123. So obviously I know we have to track very carefully. Part of that agreement to sign on to Prop 123 isn't it that we received some funds from the state?
Yes, and to keep us eligible for the funds, one of the things was to show by November 2025 that we can do each stage in the development review process within 90 days. So yeah, we are getting funds.
What do we get? I mean, is it a percentage or?
I would have to get from Jessica Prosser and Housing and Community Development. We've looked at grants that we'd be eligible for say, updating the UDO, but a lot of the work is already underway and we don't want to wait to exactly fit in a grant cycle and then be beholden to doing it their way versus just be off and running. But yeah, there is money going into housing.
And see, and I didn't realize it was like you had to apply for a grant. I thought you automatically, if you met those metrics, you automatically got money from the state, but maybe I'm mistaken.
There's two pots of money. There is some money that goes into housing, and that's the number I'll get from Jessica, what we're getting. But then there's also grants that are being made available for code updates, technical assistance. So we're tracking that. And if we ever say we got way more affordable housing projects coming in the door and we needed some development review help, we would then apply for that grant.
Okay. And then lastly, Jacob, you mentioned the workload obviously continuing to increase as we have more development happening. From a staffing perspective, are we in line percentage-wise to the amount of work?
Yeah, Councilmember, we added 7 positions in the 2025 budget that went to council last year with those budget adds. We're always trying to be lean and mean and have the right number of staff for the volume of work. The other thing that, we've been trying to dissipate our leverage of third-party reviews that happened because of COVID and some of the volumes and staffing numbers that dwindled over the last 5 years. I feel that we're between Janine and I think Janine's mostly fully staffed up, maybe one position she's recruiting for now. I'm going after some strategic positions with my team, particularly on some of the building plans reviewers, some of those positions, engineers, plan review, life safety review, hard to fill positions. It's hard to find the right folks, and we want to make sure we get the right cultural fit and the right customer service approach. But we're pretty staffed up. I think I've only got a couple vacancies that we're actively recruiting for. And so we feel that going into 2025, we've got the right number of staff to accommodate the work we're seeing in a sustainable way.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate this presentation. So we'll move on to our last presentation, which is the Housing UDO.
Once again, you have me, Janine Rustad, the Director of Planning and Business Development, and I want to set the stage before I get into phase 2. Last year, I think we presented almost monthly to you on the UDO housing analysis. And early on in the project, we had one of those roundtables. It was actually a smaller one with the development community, and we developed goals that we brought to PED, and they were approved by PED. So the goals of what we're trying to do with housing is, one, first and foremost, encourage the production of more housing. We need housing, we need it now. But also recognizing that this is housing across all price points. We need that deeply affordable, which is mostly the Prop 123. There's a lot of our focus being on what's called attainable. Loosely, that definition for attainable housing is someone that's making a household between 80% and 120% of the area median income can afford that housing, whether it's for sale or for rent. Important also, many of us live and work in the city. All of us have pride in this city. So we want the flexibility of approving housing without sacrificing design and that sense of community. We want quality in Aurora. And then, of course, we have to address state legislative requirements and help meet the Prop 123 goals. And those Prop 123 goals also have a requirement of how much deed-restricted housing, whether it's affordable or attainable, is being built. That said, I also always make it very clear with the development community, what we're doing with this analysis, we are not asking for deed restriction. Part of what we're asking for is what helps make housing more attainable, but we are not asking or requiring them to deed restrict. A second goal was increasing density while maintaining livability. And what's guided this, and when I get into the second phase, is also what we've seen as we've made adjustments through the Planning and Zoning Commission, is we want integrated neighborhoods with a diversity of housing types and price points. You don't want monotony within a big development area. And you also want people who they might be buying their starter home to go for a walk, or even better, look across the street and be able to see, that's my next house I'm striving for. We want houses to be within walkable distance of usable open space. That can be private or public, but again, the key here is usable. My joke is, coming from Oregon, where if you had a planned development, 10% had to be open space, and they got to count where they put that entry sign to their community. That's usable for your dogs when you walk them, but not for your kids to play or you to go sit in a park. We want a good public realm, so walkable blocks and streets, architectural standards that engage with the street. We're also looking at that on-street parking, because whether it's motor courts with increased housing, that's one of the items that's going forward for approval already. When you have smaller lots in general, if those are all front-loaded and you have a combination, you're restricting the on-street parking. Couple that with, we're allowing less than a 2-car garage. So we need to think holistically about the public realm. That supportive street network is another consideration. Walkable distance, or at least a very short drive to retail or commercial. Again, as we are creating more dense neighborhoods, they need these residents, and I live in one of these neighborhoods, we need places to go nearby, not have to drive 15, 20 minutes to meet your everyday needs. Another goal was looking at the time for approvals. Again, this gets to balancing certainty and flexibility, and looking at the roadblocks. A lot of this has been handled through the UDO process updates. And then we have worked very closely with the development community on the final goal, which is quantifying the impact of proposals that we can come up with on housing costs. Examples of that are working very closely with the Windler Group on 1-car garages, pad parking, how you can reduce housing costs, building materials, how you can still get quality housing but not require certain materials that can add to housing costs. So again, it's been a conversation as we've considered these goals. As we've mentioned throughout today's meeting, we have done a lot of pilot projects, whether it's been on process, on allowing more smaller lots. Just by way of a reminder, with the 2019 adoption of the UDO, we now allow up to 50% small lots. But we also changed the definition of small lots. So what was a small lot under the old code is now a regular size lot. So we already built in a lot of flexibility. But we do recognize that we've got the need for more housing, and this is one way to get at it. So we have an RFP, a request for proposals, going live. I was going to say tomorrow. I'm a council week. I'm always a day ahead of myself. Monday feels like it's a 2-day, so it's going out on Friday. Asking for help of how we take all these ideas that we've come up with, that we've tested through these pilot projects, that we continue to test with ongoing pilot projects, and codify them without the code just really exploding and becoming unburdensome or overly burdensome, both to try to follow and to implement. So right in the beginning of the RFP, we lay out the items that we've seen come up for adjustments, and this is going to sound familiar. It's that street network, making sure that we have smaller blocks, that it's walkable, that we're creating a good sense of place. Connected to that is parks, increasing the proximity to parks, making sure it's usable open space. Mixed use. We're having success in getting pilot projects and adjustments approved when there is that proximity to existing or planned retail. Looking at the public realm. This again is your detached sidewalks, the landscaping, the street trees, how the buildings communicate with the street. You don't want just to have a garage facing the street, but you want to see more of the windows, that front door, and the parking being an important issue. And then finally, product diversity, which is going to start looking at our requirements for the mix of materials. The type of products we're looking and what we'll be doing throughout this process is we will have at least 3 more development roundtables, because again, we need to listen to the development community. Is what we're coming up with based on our past roundtables going to work? What aren't we thinking of? Then we're also asking for 5 design booklets, which will have be very graphic heavy to illustrate what these developments can look like. Again, when we've had a lot of conversation with several developers on limiting that front-loaded product and having more alley-loaded, trying to quantify that, seeing what a good mix of both can look like. And then we're going to have topic area papers to get into the economics, because again, we want to be able to show that this is moving the needle and making housing available at a more diverse range of price points. And then finally, this consultant is going to help us write the code. This is going to be a very heavy lift, because we want to, again, create more certainty, but still maintain flexibility. But it gets back to something that Jason actually said to me early in my tenure at the city, and I often repeat it, that there's 2 paths to development. The quick is follow our code to the T. And that, yes, that's the quick way, but we know our code cannot and should not predict every form of development that may come along, or every unique aspect to a site. So we need also the flexibility, which is adjustments. But staff is getting very, very good of having clear lines for adjustments of what we need to see in order for staff to support it. Developers always have the risk to say, staff, we don't agree with you. We think we have a great product and go forward. But again, in partnership, we want to get to a place where we all agree this is creating good community. So that in a nutshell is what we're going to be looking at in 2025. We hope to, or our target is to complete this by the end of the year. It is a huge lift. The goal is have that consultant on board by the end of April. And again, we're already doing a lot of the background work. So happy to answer your questions and take your input.
Questions? I have one on the RFP. So is this different than when we did, every 10 years we do the whole comprehensive plan consultant person?
Yes, this is for the UDO. And as you know, in 2019, it had been a several-year process of overhauling the UDO.
Yeah.
My goal is we never do that again, because we are incrementally looking at what needs to be updated, and housing is the next big section of the code that needs to be updated. Let's keep up with the times and not wait. And when you do a major overhaul, one that's a lot of staff time, that's a lot of consultant budget, and it takes, when you do everything at once, it takes a lot of time. So this is carving out housing, but also looking at the tendrils, because it gets into some of the design standards, some of the parking standards, but being more targeted.
Yeah, I guess I'm confused on this, because we did all the roundtables. We got a lot of feedback on what amendments need to happen, what change, reduce the amount of amendments or adjustments, and then all the different components that have come forward last year. So how is this different than what the knowledge we already have within our own staff, within all these roundtable discussions, that they're going to do anything different than, are they looking at like, this is, the perfect world of what we want in the city?
So from the roundtables, we've carved off the low-hanging fruit that we can do with staff writing the code amendments. When we get into small lots, we have a lot of fact-finding we've done. We have more to do. As I mentioned, the code right now allows 50% small lots. Do we want to consider in portions in smaller neighborhoods that we would allow 100% small lots? Those are policy questions that will also have to come back to you. We've had a lot of back and forth, as I've also mentioned, on the parking, that front-loaded small lots reduce to street parking. So what's the answer? Is it a combination of alley loaded, front loaded? Do we have carved out areas that are just for parking? Which when we hear about alleys, it's that they cost money. It adds a few $1,000s to the cost of the home. Well, if you don't have parking and you have to set aside parking, is that a wash with having an alley? So we need some help diving deeper specifically into this small lot. But the other things we've heard is materials of housing. Right now we have a checklist and you have to pick a few of these. Can we simplify that? We've had some suggestions, sometimes competing recommendations. So now it's getting that consultant in to help us refine and codify. Again,
and is the consultant, I mean, are they a design, what background would you be looking for from this consultant, like their expertise?
It's going to be in several buckets. So one is having some design expertise on the team that'll help us work through these issues of balancing, creating more housing with livability. But also we are leaning very heavily on code writing. So that could be a planner with code writing experience. It might be an attorney that does code writing. So it's going to be a mixed team. And then again, including all our teams, both our planning teams from Jacob's side, because transportation is an issue here, and then parks for our open space.
Okay. I guess I was just making sure we're not duplicating what we already know.
We are building off of that and refining it.
And so then when it's finished, when the report comes in, then how is the decision made on implementing any of that?
We will policy questions such as percentage small lots. We will bring first to PED, get your input, and then bring that through to a study session to make sure we're heading in the right direction. We are going to have those roundtables using the Development Review Advisory Board for input, but the end product isn't just a report, it is code revisions that will then go through the adoption process.
Okay. Can we see the RFP?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? I guess that is it. Thank you so much for the presentation. And then I'm looking to see if I think we have a oil and gas report from Brad Pierce.
Yes, thank you very much, Councilmember Bergan. My report for the fourth quarter of 2024 is in the packet. Applicants coming to study session on February 24th. So assuming City Council move those forward and appoints those two folks, we'll have a full complement of committee members, of 11 committee members. And however, we're going to have some folks term limited in June, some oil and gas industry folks, and then some large property owner folks. So we are looking in June to fill those spots for those who have been termed out. So that's it for me. Appreciate the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. And then small business, I guess we have a new executive director, Janine, that you want to introduce.
Yes, and I am very excited to introduce Ashvina Patel. I'll give you a little bit of her background and then let her talk a little bit about herself. But this was a nationwide search. Marcia McGilly, who had served in the role, I forget exactly how many years, retired in December. So the city, along with OEDIT at the state, our small business administrator, it was a partnership search for our next executive director. Ashvina comes to us. She has deep roots in Aurora. She is a resident and has served as chair of the Aurora Immigrant and Refugee Committee. She's very passionate about making sure everybody has access to the resources of the city and growing our city's economy. She was raised by entrepreneurs, has been a small business owner herself. So she brings along that experience as well as strategic leadership and business development and community-focused initiatives. She already within 3 weeks has hit the ground running, and I have a friend that uses the term humble confidence, and I think this is an excellent way to describe Ashvina and how she is approaching her new role. So Ashvina, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Janine. That was a beautiful introduction. Good morning, council members and fellow PED team members I haven't met yet. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. By way of introduction, I have owned businesses myself and recently helped a private sector business grow a sister company into a thriving venture. My passion has always been helping businesses grow, whether it's creating jobs, revitalizing neighborhoods, or fostering innovation. And I think when businesses succeed, communities thrive. So I am committed to making sure entrepreneurs have the resources and the guidance and support here in the city that they need, not just to start, but really to sustain and expand. So my goal is to work collaboratively with city leaders such as yourselves, business owners, and community partners to drive economic growth that benefits everyone. So I look forward to working together to ensure our city continues to be a place where businesses thrive.
Well, welcome to the city of Aurora.
Thank you so much.
Okay, and then I think Bruce, I know Bruce, you said you have your updates in the packet. Did you also want to add anything?
Yes, good morning, everyone. Bruce Dalton, CEO of Visit Aurora. In your packet today, I've included the economic impact of travel for the city of Aurora. This report was produced by Dean Runyon and Associates, one of the leading resources for U.S. travel and tourism data. What I like about the report is that it's easy to read. It explains its methodology with all of its sources. And they've also worked with us to understand that we're in 3 counties, but only parts of 3 counties. And also they work with the Colorado Tourism Office, Visit Denver, on their annual economic impact reports. A couple of interesting facts was the direct travel spending for the city in 2023 was $535.5 million. That was up 5.3 from 2022. An interesting fact that we didn't really realize was the number of people and visitors that come to our city that actually stay with friends and family. And that was actually discussed when we met with our consultant to create our 3-year strategic plan as well, which really shows the importance of our delivering our visitor guide to our local residents. And we're getting ready to send out about 90,000 visitor guides. We just produced our new visitor guide that will go in the mail in the next week and be mailed to 90,000 people. We also have about 40,000 guides that we will distribute through the region, as well as to potential clients and people looking to come to Aurora. And it's also downloadable. I can put a link in the chat so everyone can look at it.
Wonderful.
Happy to go deeper into the report if anyone is interested. And I do plan on providing our full report of our 3-year strategic plan to the PED either next month or the following month. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Bruce. So are you saying that people are staying with family and you're trying to get families to kick them out of their house and put them in a hotel?
Well, in my
When they're
household,
visiting?
it's 3 days maximum, and I've had 5, and 3 days is about
Mine
the
is 2.
perfect fit. But yeah, I mean, we just didn't realize how many people come to Aurora and stay with family and friends. So interesting fact.
We got to make it enticing for them to stay somewhere else, huh?
Yes, we got lots of hotels.
We do. All right. Well, thank you for that. And we look forward to when you do the full presentation to our committee.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. And I think that's it. Are there any other questions from committee members, council members? Okay.
I have nothing.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just saying I don't have anything.
Oh, sorry. Okay, thanks. Okay, so I just want to confirm our next meeting is on March 12th. same time, same place. So everyone have a great rest of your day, and thank you for attending our meeting today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.